be showing you how to use FlashPrint, and this is a software that we use to prepare files to print on our FlashForge Adventure 3D printers here at Lakeville South. So basically what you're looking at is once you open up the FlashPrint software, you're looking at the print bed, and what you're seeing is I'm right-clicking right now and rotating it around. Okay, and this is kind of the area that's printable. So it's basically about a 6 by 6 by 6 area in real life, and then there's some controls around here. So the first thing you want to do is make sure that in the lower left here you see that I'm set up to use the FlashForge Adventure 3. That's our type of printer. If you're not set up for that, you can go up to the controls up here, and if you go up here and you go to print, you can go to machine type and you can select any number of types here. So this would pick the type of 3D printer you have, but in our case I already have it set at Adventurer 3. So that's how you change that. Now as far as loading in files, how do you get files in here? Remember, we are using STL files only, so make sure that you have converted your file into an STL, like from MeshMixer or from Tinkercad. You export out as an STL, or from Onshape. And then in this case, one way to bring in a file is simply to grab it from the desktop and load it in. And you'll see that there it brings it in. So I have this dog in there. Another way to do it is to click the load button and go find it, okay, on here. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to grab this one right here, and it will load that one in. And you see that it says right away, this model is off the platform. Do you want to put it on the platform? You always say yes, because it should be on the platform. So now I have these two models stuck together basically, and I'll deal with that in just a minute. But so you can either load it in by dragging or load it in by searching it and finding the file on your computer. So a couple quick things is I'm going to separate these. I'm going to go to the move function and move these apart so you can see them. So over here on the left are the kind of the navigation screen to control the file and get it how you want it. The view I don't often use, but you can. If you click on it, you can see that the view allows you to look at different views very quickly. Generally, if you right-click, you can rotate, hold the right-click button down, you can rotate around and see what you need to see. So if you left-click, it pans. So you move it around like so. So I generally don't use the view button, but you could. Okay. The move button allows me to click on an object. See, this one is highlighted, and move it around on the platform. Okay. Same with the dog here. So it is kind of like you'd expect. Now, the rotate button allows me to rotate the object I've selected. So the dog is selected. This file is not selected. Okay. And if I click the rotate button again, up comes the controls to do. So I could flip the dog in a certain way, but obviously that's going to be the best way to print it in this case. And every file has a best way to print it based upon making sure it prints correctly. So we'll talk about that more as we go on. So I could rotate it. Another way I could do is grab this and tip it. Okay. And you see when I tip it too far, when that ear gets outside the platform, okay, right now, that this is outside the build area, and so is the foot. So both those surfaces have turned red. It kind of warns you that you're outside the build area. I'm just going to go back to reset right here, and it puts it back at the way it was. So I can grab any of these and rotate them. Now if I want to do the same here, then you can see I just click on this object, and I can rotate that object. As far as scaling goes, it tells me the size of my object. Okay, so in some cases, if I need to, and you can see, if you can see very well, I'm going to zoom in here, but here's the z-axis is right here, up and down. The x-axis is right here, going left to right, and the y-axis is going front to back. So you can kind of see them down there in the corner. Very faint, but you can see it. So if I wanted to change the dog size, I would go to the z-axis and set it at, let's say, 75. Okay, and it's going to change all the proportions, but there now you can see the dog is smaller. Okay, and if I wanted to reset that, I could just click the reset button, or Control Z also undoes that. Now, that'll be important on some models that you have a constraint on how big you want to make them. But generally, as long as they fit on the build platform, you're going to be fine. Then, if you go to the next button here, which is the cut button, it allows me to cut apart two objects that maybe came in together, or I could split an object. So if I take and draw this line right through the dog, and I tell it to start the cut, you'll see in a second here it splits the dog apart. Now, in this case I wouldn't want to do that, but it's just kind of a neat feature to have, especially if you have multiple files that came in, or multiple objects that came in the same file. You can split it apart. Again, I hit Control Z and undid that. So that gives you kind of a preview of these navigational buttons, and I could do all the same things over here with this object as well. Then if I'm getting ready to print this, that's these buttons up here. So there's a couple things that I want to talk about as far as printing goes, and I'll undo that for a second. I'm going to move this, let's take the view here and move this over here. So now if I was just ready to print, let's say I wanted to print these two, there's a couple things to consider. First of all, that these ears on this dog literally are starting out in the middle of nowhere. So the 3D printers go back and forth, building layer by layer, stacking up to the top of the dog here. But at this point, they're going to have to pick up this ear out in the middle of nowhere. Over here is another good example of when an object slants out at over 45 degrees, the filament will sag if there's no supports. So I'm going to show you this as an example where you go to print, and if you don't see this print dialog box, okay, the expert mode, then what you need to do is, I'm going to cancel this real quick. Okay, I'm going to go over here again up in the upper left hand corner and go to print. If we go to preferences, okay, and it's generally going to come up like this under general. Go to print and click from basic mode. Okay, and if it was basic mode, you'd see this. Okay, you go to print. This is the basic mode. Very simple screen, and it does work, but we like to be in the expert mode, so I'm going to hit OK, and then I'm going to go up to File, Preferences, and click on Print and change that to expert mode and hit OK. Now when I go to print, up comes the screen, and there's a lot of information in here that we're not going to talk about right now. But for the most part, the two things that are important is, so you're going to leave all this alone. Don't play with any of these settings, and leave the Raft on and the supports on. So the supports hold up areas that would normally sag when it's printing, and the Raft helps stick the object to the build plate. So generally right now, as a beginning 3D printer, you need to leave these alone. So you're not really going to play with any of these, but some point down the line, some of these objects can be printed without supports, and they can be printed without a Raft. So you could turn this off. But for now, we're going to leave both of these on. The type of material we're using is PLA. That's a corn-based plastic filament. It's recyclable. Another type that we will not use is called ABS. So make sure that you can see ABS here. PET is another type. When we get more advanced, you might be able to use some of those. But we almost always use PLA for a lot of reasons. It's easy to work with. It's cheap. It does a really good job of printing most things for us. So generally, all these are going to be pretty well set for you. So I'm going to hit OK, and it's going to generate these files. Now, while it's generating the files, you're going to see a Raft show up here in just a second. So the Raft is right here along the bottom. You see a Raft here as well. Okay. Now, there are no supports on here, so I'll talk about that in a minute. But the first thing I'm going to show you is up in the upper right-hand corner. It tells you an estimated time. It tells you the amount of material, and you can get it by weight. So it's 15 meters. That probably doesn't mean much. The type of material we already talked about is PLA, and that's the amount. So If you're being charged for filament, then this would be important to you. But for now, we're not charging. So in addition, over here, this is the layer heights. So right now, there's 421 layers in these models. And what's cool is I can take this scrubber bar and drag it down, and it shows you how they are 3D printed. So I'm going all the way down to the beginning. And so this is the Raft. Okay? It produces more surface area to stick your model to so that it doesn't let go during the print. So that's why the Raft is important. And as I go up, it starts going layer by layer. And I'm just scrubbing this bar up. And you can see, and this is going to bring up an important feature here in a second that I want to talk about. So as we get up, again, this area might need supports because if it gets out over 45 degrees, it could sag. But for now, I don't think it will. Okay. And then when we get up to the dog, there's the ear. So here's the point that I want to make. Let's get up here. If I zoom in here, you see right here, this first layer of the ear is out in the middle of space. So it wouldn't print. It would just actually just hang out and sag down. Okay. So, and the same is going to be true of the other ear on the dog over here. So I'm going to back out just a little bit here, and I'm going to continue. I'll rotate back up here. So this is called infill. This is a honeycomb infill, and you can, I think the infill was probably set at like 10%, so it leaves a lot of open space. It just, that way you don't waste filament. If you made 100% infill, it would take, rather than 3 hours and 28 minutes, it'd probably take about 10 or 12 hours to print this. Plus it's a waste of filament because you don't really need to do that. But that's infill, and spaces are inside the two shells. Anyway, so as we move up, you can see it continue to build and until it gets all the way up. So it's kind of cool to scrub that and just look at it, make sure it makes sense to you. Now, I could print this, but it's going to fail where the ears are, for sure. So what I'm going to do is go back, okay, to where I was, and now I'm going to go to supports. And I'm going to auto support this and let the machine make the decisions on where the supports need to go. And the supports then, as it tells you they're done here, supports are easy to break away. They're not as strong as the file of the object itself. So these, again, are just designs. You see this one doesn't need any supports. And now I could clear some of the supports if I want. I could work on some support options, but for now we're not going to deal with that. I'm going to go back. Now I'm going to print. And that's going to make sure that both my models print successfully. Again, this just is the expert mode for the printing function. All this, again, is just going to be left alone. Just making sure the supports in the Raft are on for now, and you're ready to go. So we hit print. It's going to generate the file again. And you'll see this Raft show up underneath it. The supports will stay. And there you have it. So it's ready to go. Now what I need to do is export the G code. And the G code is basically the XYZ coordinates that describe and detail out this file for the printer. So you hit export G code. You give it a specific name, and probably best to put it up on the desktop where you can get at it right away. And it's going to have whatever that name is. In this case, Dalmatians, 50 MB, which means megabytes, and .gx. And that's the file that I'll later drag onto a jump drive and take it down to the FlashForge printer and load it in and print that file. So I'll just hit save to the desktop. I already have one there, so it's replacing that. And you can see over here, it's sitting right here. That file then I grab and drag onto a jump drive and take it down to, or over to a 3D printer, a FlashForge 3D printer, and I'll be able to print. So that's a brief overview of FlashPrint and how we use it. As you get more experienced with FlashPrint, you'll be allowed to manipulate more of the options and a lot of the functions. But for now, that's the quick and easiest way, just to let the print functions. If for some reason I wanted to go back, I wanted to change something, I can just jump back to here. And again, I could take and go to supports and clear the supports out of there and start back to here. So if you need to go back, again, you just step back up here And if I wanted to load in another file, or if I want to get rid of a file, like I don't want this one anymore, I can click on it and I can hit the delete button and it goes away. Okay. A couple other quick features is I can click here on the dog and I can scale the dog. Click this twice and up comes this, and I'm going to take it down to 50%. As long as it's uniform scaling, it'll change to all 3 axes of the dog. So I'm going to change it down to 50%, and you see it's a small dog now. And if I wanted to make a bunch of them, I could go up here and duplicate. So there's another dog, and I'm going to tip this up. It'll start placing dogs everywhere. Okay, and I'm going to go up to Edit Duplicate. And you see now I can print 4 dogs, whole family of Dalmatians there. Alright, so that's just some quick and dirty features on some other options there. And again, I could delete those out by clicking on each one and hitting the delete function.